You're listening to Live Wild Radio, the part-time adventure podcast.
Join us as we explore how outdoor adventures build mind, body, and spirit.
Welcome back to Live Wild Radio. Winston here. This is going to be a solo episode, so those of you who don't like listening to my voice and we want to hear the sexy voice of Catherine, you're going to have to turn into the next episode because the way our schedules worked on this recording day, she is not back from a bike ride. So it was a case of either I record or we don't get the episode out this week. So that's what I chose to do. That's one of those things. And this happens to be a bit of a coaching topic that she probably hasn't been through yet anyway. But it's a continuation of our last episode talking about the seasons of training. So it is currently September 13th. It is a Wednesday. So middle of September. And it's a good time to talk about the idea of what to do in the different seasons, right? Now, one of the things you'll run into is some people fixate on just, there's the thing they like to do, and because you can't do it, because the weather changes, then they kind of go to shit, right? So this is where developing a plan throughout the year and changing emphasize during the year can help you. One of the things I run into, I base mine off kind of like peak fitness in the spring through now, with the idea that, you know, and when I say peak fitness, it's mainly peak endurance, with the idea that summer we did a bunch of cycling events. In the spring and then into the fall, we do some rock climbing outdoors. So, you know, it's one of those things. We did a lot of cycling during the summer, and call it late spring, as soon as the weather got nice, right? And now it's starting to get dark a little bit earlier. It's still not, you know, winter dark, but it's getting dark a little bit earlier. The mornings, we would regularly during the summer be out on the road at 6 a.m. for bike rides during the week. But it's dark now at 6 a.m. So, you know, you adjust a little bit. And one of the things of a season of focused on something, like we did through the summer, focused on cycling, is then when fall comes around, we mix it up a little bit. We get in some mountain biking, like Catharine started riding with a women's mountain bike group. And also started doing like a ladies yoga thing once a week, you know, just to add some variety. Fall is the time to kind of fix your imbalances. It's time to have some fun. You're still super, super active. You should be. But it doesn't have to be as regimented. You know, myself, during the fall, one of the things with the majority of my strength training is it's all unilateral. So one arm or one leg. And the idea, whether it's a one-legged deadlift, a one-armed press, obviously things like pull-ups I'm doing with two arms. But with most of the one-armed movements or one-legged movements, you build stability, you build balance in the body. Like if you've got asymmetries, it helps fix those. Like if you're stronger on one side or more mobile on one side. So when you've done something for a number of months, like we do with cycling, and you might be a hiker, you might be, you know, everybody's got a different thing they do. Maybe a paddler, a canoeist, or a kayaker. By then, you know, taking and doing a more well-rounded program in the fall with a lot of unilateral training. Because if you think of this, if I'm doing something like a Turkish get-up or a one-armed kettlebell press versus doing two at the same time, my body has to cross-stabilize because the weight's only on one side. My core has to brace differently than if I have a kettlebell in each hand. The same thing with a lunge. If I do a lunge with weight in one hand, then I'm running into the thing where there's more stability and core bracing that has to happen to keep from falling over than you would tend to get with doing it with, say, a barbell over your shoulders, because it's more balanced load. So that's one of the things that I do in the fall for my own training, and I tend to program in for a lot of clients. And then, we add in some fun stuff. Like we start to go back to the indoor rock climbing gym. The evenings are cooler. It's obviously a little bit darker earlier. So getting into some sort of fun, regular things. We go 2 or 3 times to the climbing gym. Still get out for some rides, but they tend to be a little bit shorter during the week anyway, because we're, have less daylight time. So usually, maybe get out on a lunch hour for 45 minutes, a couple times a week, and then get for a longer ride on the weekend. And it might be, the weekend might be a mountain bike ride. It might be a gravel ride or a road ride, so we're doing something regularly, but it's not, as regimented. The idea is, have a bit of fun for a while, while still trying to accumulate, the idea of doing something every day. And it could be just walking, it could be, but doing something every day, getting at least 3 strength training sessions in a week that are unbalanced, or unilateral, as I was saying. And, the thing comes in is that the focus of those isn't to push the numbers up, the weights up as much, as it is to focus on quality of movement, right? Because what you're using these for is to unbalance or rebalance the body. So that's one of the big focuses that I have. So, you run into the thing where you can't optimize everything all the time. Because, if your goal is to build muscle, you have to cause some muscle damage, and muscle building workouts are fatiguing. So, there's no way that you can do, 5 to 10 hours of bike riding a week and optimize muscle building, right? So this is why we break different demands out throughout the year. And, the idea with the fall, when I used to race bikes, it was the off season, right? Before you got into winter training to prepare for the spring. And the whole thing is you stay active, but you have fun. Because the reality is, with all of us, when it stops being fun, it's just a chore. Like, some workouts that you do, maybe you don't enjoy. But if everything is a chore, eventually you're going to stop doing it. Like, if everything is just like, oh, fuck, I got to do this, and oh, I got to do that. And, there isn't any that you look forward to and you just enjoy. And it's like, oh, man, I can't believe that was a workout because I had fun. And it can be dicey for people whose sport, like their main thing they want to get better at is something like jiu-jitsu, because it doesn't really have a season. So you almost artificially have to create one for yourself so that you're not going balls to the wall all the time. There has to be like ebbs and flows, right? Think of the actual seasons. And fall is kind of a time of, even just think of it as personality wise, it's a little bit more chill. Obviously if you're a football person, it's a different story because football kicks off, but, it's cozy. It's looking at the leaves when they change. It's going for, you're out and doing things, but it isn't kind of got the same go, right? If that makes sense for people. And, if you think of it in that broader context, right? The description of seasons fits with the concept of periodization, right? The way that athletes, they don't train the same all year long. There's sort of like general preparation, and as you get closer to the season, there's specific preparation, and then there's maintenance during the season. Because, during the season, it's trying to optimize, if you can get a little fitter, but optimizing your recovery between events, especially if you compete regularly in whatever you do, whether it's play football every weekend, have a bike race every week, every weekend, basically there's the event is tiring. You have to recover from it, get a little bit of training in, and then be fresh enough to compete again, right? So that always has to factor in. And then after the season, there's the off season, right? So that's exactly the same idea as we talk about for the average person who doesn't have a specific sport, using the actual seasons, right? Because we're talking about autumn right now. But then when you get into winter, if you were, say, a cyclist and you were going to start competing in April, then winter is when you start building your base. Base building with a little bit of top end work on. Most of it's going to be done indoors on a bike trainer. Life sucks. Although the modern trainers like the Tax now, and is it now or Neo? We've got one in the basement. You do these virtual racing online and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of fun for what it is for indoor training, but it's still not riding outdoors. But you'll run into the thing where for the cyclist, it's sort of the early preparation. There's still strength training, but now we're doing more time each week on the bike. We're building the base. We're building a little bit of VO2 max and gradually building that capacity leading into when you can first get outside and start riding to build that, transition everything you did inside to outside. Well, if you think about the person whose training goal is health and longevity, then I like to use the winter first. If we go December, January, that is your 8-week muscle building block, right? We call it getting jacked and tanned, although you're not getting much of a tan in December and January. But the whole idea there is because we all over 30 are losing muscle mass unless you do something about building it. All benefit, as we get older, of having some dedicated hypertrophy or muscle building training. And obviously, if you're training hard to build muscle, then it's hard to have enough energy to also do a ton of cardio or a ton of speed work or a ton of power work or a ton of whatever, right? So that's where the emphasis lies. You still do some cardiovascular training, right? Because you don't want to lose it, but you're not putting maybe like 3 to 4 half-hour sessions a week, just enough to maintain it, nothing fancy. And it's leveraging the fact that usually from Thanksgiving to New Year's, people generally eat a little bit more anyway, or a lot. So if you're doing a training with an emphasis on muscle growth, and you're getting enough protein, then the extra calories you eat, not all of them are going to turn into fat, right? Think of it as, for people who've ever done bodybuilding in the past, think of it as a strategic bulk versus just getting fat over Christmas, because you're getting in your, basically we call it 4 days a week of strength training, with an emphasis on hypertrophy, which is, a little bit moderate, we'll call it like 6 to 20 rep sets, relatively short rest periods, a fair amount of volume, taking the sets close to failure. You're going to get a pump. You're going to get a burn. There's going to be a bit of struggle on those last few reps. Those are all kind of the hallmarks of training that will lead to muscle growth. And naturally, you'll get a little stronger too, even though that's not what the emphasis is on. You progressively overload. The idea is each week to do some more reps or more weight. You can add some sets. The idea is to cause enough muscle breakdown during each workout that then the muscles grow. And how we do the specifics, and if you want to know more about the specifics, I've got an article on the website, Live Wild Radio. If you just click on the tab on the top articles, one about how to build muscle and look better naked. I think that's how I titled it, because clickbait, and there's no naked pictures. Just gives you an idea how to look better naked. But we get into explanations of the mechanisms and how to program for building muscle. So that idea, adding that in the December, January, and then it's one of those things. You get a few cardio sessions, you make sure you do some mobility, and at the end of January, you actually kind of like added a little bit of meat on the bones. The delts are looking good, and the glutes, and then the natural thing that makes sense after you've done a hypertrophy phase where you naturally did some excess calories, is to go into, in the spring, a cut. Bring the calories down a little bit, increase your activity, take your strength training sessions, and this is sort of basically, if you think about January or December, January, then when you get into February, you run into the thing where think of it as late winter, even though it could be still feel like the dead of winter. And what you're going to do is, if we did 2 months of a build, now we want to get rid of some of that fat we maybe put on over the Christmas season while we were bulking, building some muscle. We take that next 2 months, next 8-week block, and still do some strength training, because you don't want to lose the muscle you built. Still focus on getting 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. But now maybe we add in some intermittent fasting, right? 5 days a week, eat between noon and 8. Start increasing the tempo of your training, so that your actual strength training is more circuits. That'll help your conditioning. You gradually build up the amount of cardio you're doing, because your strength training isn't as fatiguing because you're not taking your sets as hard, but you're doing more of them. But when you're doing the circuit style, you're getting longer rests for each muscle group in between. So that's another way to do it. And then, you naturally are going to be running into the thing, the more volume you're getting in, the more cardio you can get in, all of that leads to more calories burned, right? And if you're eating a little bit less calories, and the easiest way to do that, in my experience, is just intermittent fasting. Shorten the window you eat each day and get adequate protein. And I find it hard to overeat when you do that. So just basically, in my case, I go 12:30 to 8:30. I've shortened my eating window to 8 hours a day. And most of the time, that window actually stops at like about 8. So it's actually 7.5 hours. But there's no magic to 7, 8 hour, what you're doing is just limiting the amount of time you eat each day. And that leads to a caloric deficit. Like, if you eat less calories than you burn and you get enough protein and there's some strength training, you're going to lose fat and at least not lose muscle. Excuse me while I take a small drink. Water. It's good stuff. and with all that, make sure you always stay hydrated. Then from there, if we look at that as February and March, well, April, now you can start getting outside maybe. Get outside on the weekends. And, one of the things that I found really effective too, February or March, if you want to do like a fitness challenge. So, if you start your cut in February and then for the month of March, doing something like the 10,000 swing challenge. Catherine, I've done it a few times over the years, but if you really want to like shrink your waist size, build your butt and build like, crazy endurance, it's 500 kettlebell swings, not in one row, basically it's multiple sets, but 500 swings a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks, works out to 10,000 swings, plus each day you're also doing one extra exercise. So you're doing kettlebell swing and a press, kettlebell swing and a pull-up, kettlebell swing and something else. And that's the way that we built it. It originated with Coach Dan John. He's got a bunch of variations. We created our own that was an EMOM. And you run into the thing where when it starts, the first few workouts suck so hard because you're just gassed. But you run into the thing where that's all you're doing. It literally is half an hour a day, 5 days a week, and then get 10,000 steps a day. Like, that's my prescription. And Catharine lost like 13 pounds in a month. I've lost, when I've done it, I've like, it's sort of in about the same 12 or 13 pounds of body fat, because you notice your muscles are bigger, right? Your forearms are jacked. Your butt is like made out of rocks. It gets so firm. So that's another way that I find highly effective. Like, so if you did that for the month of March, you'd come into April like just a monster, and because you're doing the same thing for a month, you're kind of bored towards the end. So then you run into the thing where you're just like, okay, I accomplished this challenge. You feel great about yourself. You got all these fitness benefits out of it. And now you're ready to like kick off the spring, right? And it depends where you live. Like where we are, in the Waterloo region in Ontario, Canada, winter is fickle as hell. Last year we had no problem. Like we were out riding in like really light clothes in early April. But you'll run into the thing where we've had winters where, late April are still shitty. So it just, depends. But usually by May it rocks. And then, a lot of it will really come in like that April, May, oftentimes tends to be pretty good rock climbing time for us outside as well. So we'll get out for some climbing. And through the winter, even when we're doing our bodybuilding, we go to the climbing gym like 2 to 4 times a week. It's still work. Like, you need to factor that into your recovery. But for us, climbing's fun. So it allows you to get some extra work in without even feeling like work. And then, basically for us, once the good weather hits, we'll call it May, June, July, August, and then into September. It's like bike rides, progressively getting longer. We do a few cycling events through the summer, like these gravel events, and then we're part of some clubs so that we can go, out on group rides, like group tours with people on the weekends. We have a lot of fun with that. Plus we do all of our like little camping trips. And so we've built our lifestyle around activities, and Catherine and I both love riding. We both love climbing, both love hiking. So for us, it works well because it gives us something to do together. And, sometimes it can be difficult Because if you are in a relationship where your partner isn't into the things you're into, but also isn't supportive of the time you're putting into your looking after your health, it can be tough. I've been there, and it's always kind of finding ways to negotiate to make it work, so that you have the time you need to look after yourself, and not just physically, but also one of the things I often run into with these, like going on rides, getting my workouts in, all of this is it also massively plays into your mental health. And because we've built a community around, like the people we go on rides with, the people we climb with, a lot of our friends do this stuff. So it gives you a bond and reason to go hang out with people. So you've built this community, which is really good for, your mental health, because we're social animals, right? If the last 3 years haven't taught us anything, it's that we weren't meant to be just isolated, right? Because a lot of people probably don't even realize like how much, even just going to work, the social interaction they get from that contributes to their well-being, until they don't have it anymore. And we just, because of the pandemic, Catherine and I decided to be much more conscious of consciously building our community, like making a point of, having people we do things with. And, sometimes in the case of like riding and things like that, it's like helping people, mentoring, bringing other people out. Other times it's, just more fun going out with people that are just, it's fun to rip it up with. But that, network, and we run into the same thing, at the climbing gym. It's the same people are supportive, you're all into the same thing, so it's a fun vibe, right? And in a world where the number one song is basically about the corruption of politicians and basically the world seemingly lost. Finding a community that you can build where you're just like, yeah, whatever, I'm going with my climbing friends and having fun. It makes it easier to deal with the world as it sits, right? I find that's a big part of it. And then it's one of those things. There'll be some people you're able to help out or mentor. There's going to be people you learn from. And sometimes it's learning, as far as the sport you're doing or whatever. But it also, I just love those conversations, like the adventure of sitting around with people and having a conversation and seeing where it goes. I really enjoy that. So that's sort of one of those other things that it isn't exercise specifically, but it's part of the benefits you get from it, if that makes any sense. We see it part and parcel. It's part of the same thing. The community we build because of the activities we do improves both our physical health and our mental health. And having people to do it with makes it easier to be consistent because you have fun and they hold you accountable. And, it becomes this kind of fun snowball effect. And the same thing goes if you sign up for an event. Like if you sign up and pay the money to go on either like a race or a bike tour, which get ridden like races, the Grand Fondos and the gravel rides, even if the goal is just to finish, right? There's an impetus that comes because you have a set date and time that you need to be ready, right? So you tend to put a little bit more in. And as long as you don't go overboard and get excessive with anything, generally, and this is sort of the tightrope, okay? There's no hard and fast rule generally. But the fact is that if you do more, you'll perform better. If you do more and you can recover from it, you'll be healthier, right? Like if you have a better cardiovascular health or cardiovascular performance, it's directly linked to longevity. Same thing with strength, same thing with balance. So improving these things, you'll run into the thing where you'll feel better today, you'll look better today, or like you'll look better now. But then in 20 years, like in 20 years, I'll be 72. I want to still be doing this shit, right? I don't want to be some retiree who, barely does anything. Like who wants, like, this is one of those things that I think probably not enough people think about. Who wants to be retired and not have enough energy? You have all this free time and no energy to do anything. No physical capability, right? You got the free time. Maybe, if you were smart, you've invested, you've got a good retirement fund. You can travel, you can see things. You can, I want to take and go on bike rides everywhere. I want to go climb new places. I want to go see places. I don't want it to be, 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm so wiped out that the rest of the day's a write-off, right? And one of the things we know is that even when you're in 70s, 80s, you can be a machine if you built it when you were younger, right? You're going to go down. You're not going to be as good as you could be when you were 40. But when you're 70, you can be as good as an out-of-shape 40-year-old, or better even. So that's that kind of thing to think about. Like, what do you want your future to look like? And I'd rather be that, old guy that's got old man strength and can just do shit and surprise people, and have young people not be able to keep up with me, than, be where I would be if I didn't do these things. If I didn't do the training, if I didn't do, pay attention to what I eat and get a good night's sleep and, blah, 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 all the different things we do to live a healthier lifestyle. So, and that's the thing you run into. Like, if you look at, back to our seasons thing, like for us, summer is playtime, and for everybody, like if you want to go to the beach and look good in your bathing suit, you had to do that work, right? Build a little bit of muscle, lose a little bit of body fat, they kind of go hand in hand. If you want to do big canoe trips, you need the endurance, but you also need the strength to carry shit, right? And do loaded carries. And, so how you would structure your program, the nuts and bolts, the specific, sets and reps and, what you do for cardio and how you build your conditioning and all that would vary subtly depending on what your goal is, what your activity you like to do. But the fact comes in, it's that same kind of seasonal process. Now, if your super passion is downhill skiing, now you can picture how everything inverts, if that makes any sense. If downhill skiing is your thing, well then winter is your summer. Spring is your off season. Summer is, sort of your general prep. Fall is your specific prep. And then winter is your season, where you work on maintenance and you work on skills doing the actual activity. So that would flip upside down a little bit. And if you're somebody who's like, maybe you got a winter sport and a summer sport, maybe you're a cyclist and a cross-country skier, then each of those things compresses a little bit, if that makes any sense. And obviously you wouldn't do your January, February muscle building You might do 2 months a year of hypertrophy training, but it might be 1 month in the spring, 1 month in the fall. So it just depends, because we just, again, want to make sure that you're not losing muscle mass as you age, right? So there's these little things that, depending on what somebody's goals are, and this is why, like, as a coach, I spreadsheet things out, right? What are your goals? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses, right? And you can do this yourself. And then it allows you to look at, okay, these are the things I have to do. These are the times I need to be ready for things, right? And it's almost like reverse engineering. If you know these are your weaknesses, this is your sport, right? Like, let's say your weakness is hill climbing, and you're signed up for an event in July that has a ton of hill climbing, right? You're doing a Grand Fondo that actually has you going up and down mountains. Well, then it would be one of those things. It's like, okay, your weakness is hill climbing. Why is it a weakness? Is it a sustained power issue? Is it that you're too heavy? And we sort of figure that out, figure out how to build those things so that you're ready for that event. And it's just sort of backstepping, going, okay, well, if we want to be ready for this, we'll call it July 17th. We'll go backwards from that and then figure out a methodical method to get you there, right? And this is all something everybody can do themselves. And it takes practice to sort of self-analyze. And that, again, is part of what coaches, why they can be useful. Because sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees when you're analyzing yourself. And I say this about myself. Sometimes it's a case, I know exactly what my fucking weakness is, but the problem is that the thing that fixes it is shit I hate doing. So whereas if I had a coach from the outside, they do the assessment, they go, okay, well, here's your program, do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, and then you do it. So I've got to be very disciplined to not just program in doing shit I like to do, for myself. Sort of like they say, a client who's his own lawyer has an idiot for a client. A coach who is his own coach sometimes has an idiot for a client too, because we all sort of fall prey to the same things, which is going as easy as you should when you should, going as hard as you should when you should, knowing the difference. Going hard's fun, right? Focusing on recovery, like all the different things. There's things that are important to do, but that aren't fun. And that's sort of one of the biggest issues that we all run into, is trying to balance enjoying what we're doing, and improving, right? And then after a while, like, you start to realize, like, progress is fun. If you look at it that way, that, yes, I'll do some stuff that I'll dial it back a bit. I won't like attack all the time when I'm riding, or, I'll take it easy up that hill, even though I don't want to. Somebody passed me and my ego's hurt. You'll be a little more disciplined, but that leads to then the payoff down the road, right? All of these things, like all the sacrifice is just investment, right? Really when we think of sacrifice, it's giving up today for something more tomorrow. And with all of our fitness things, it's exactly the same, right? We're putting in, money in a mutual fund. And that might mean I can't go party with my friends right now. I'm not drinking beer right now. I'm, instead of watching Netflix, I'm lifting weights or riding my bike or stretching or whatever it is you have programmed in. But then you get a payoff down the road, right? Both in the short term, which is looking better, having your wife pat your bottom, going, looking good in those jeans. You know, having energy, your joints not hurting, like all of these benefits, right? There's the, doing well at something. And then there's just all of the overall health benefits that come. Then there's the long-term payoff, right? Which is, you're able to be around for your grandkids. You're able to, you and your partner, when the kids are gone and you're retired and, it is pretty stress-free. Well, now you can travel the world. You can go on those, whatever you've ever talked about, right? Because nothing is sadder than you reach the point where you have the time and you have the money and you don't have the physical capability, right? And that's always one of those things that for me is always right there. I don't ever want to get to that point. And we all know we're going to, right? But I want to push it out as long as possible, right? Because who wants to retire not, you're whether it's 60, 65, 70, whatever, you do you, but retire, you have all this free time and all you do is just sit there. I don't want to be that old man, I don't want to be that old man who, goes down to the coffee shop with a bunch of other old men, although it's a good social thing, argues about how the world sucks, and then goes and sits and, watches TV all day, right? Like, that's not sort of the way I want to live out my golden years, I want to be kind of like an old badass, right? And that just stays basically looking after yourself, keeping the pedal to the metal. So, yeah, hopefully my concept of seasons, both seasons of training, seasons of the year, all makes sense, the way that I conceptualize it. Because the big thing that so many people run into is they just do the same shit all the time. And if you're doing, like, rule number one, it's better to do something than nothing. Being consistent is key. But, by cycling the points of emphasis throughout the year, you'll have periods where your cardiovascular fitness is higher, periods where you're getting stronger, periods where you're building some muscle. When you sort of use periodization throughout the year, rather than try to maximize all of the qualities at once, you actually get much, much better. And it gives you different things to look forward to, right? Like if you've spent like a whole, season minimally doing just enough strength training to maintain, and then tons of miles, whether it's hiking, biking, whatever it is you're doing, with an emphasis on cardio, and then you're starting to shift that over in the fall, that can actually be fun, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to get buff and strong this winter, still doing some cardio, but that's not the emphasis, so, if everybody's got questions, you can find us on, Instagram. You can DM us, livewild_radio, Live Wild Radio on Facebook, livewildradio.com. You can go and contact us. We have all of our coaching programs on there, including our fabulous Gen X transformation program to go from couch to superhero. I'm just, having fun with the marketing. But the idea is you go from being somebody who is less than active, who sits too much, which is sort of the modern ailment. And in a period of months, we work to undo a lot of that and help lean you out in a very easy to follow way. From what I have seen, from an online coaching standpoint, our prices are super reasonable. for what you get, because, in a roundabout way, I could argue that I'm helping you live longer. But anyway, if you're interested in that, livewildradio.com, click the fitness coaching. You can't miss it when you get there. And if you go to our website, download our Turning Back the Clock ebook, and a whole bunch of information about using exercise to live longer. And then if you're somebody who's in really good shape but wants to lose some fat quickly, then if you look under our articles, you will find an article, Fat Loss Cheat Code, and that gives you a download. It's a program I put together and there's a podcast about it. But the Fat Loss Cheat Code is a 4-week rapid fat loss program. But the key to it is you got to be in good enough shape to make it through. You'll either lose weight or die. I don't joke with that. Not that you'd die, but you'd be miserable because you'd overtrain or potentially get injured because you're doing too much. So, but if you happen to be in that rare thing where you're fairly fit, but you just eat too much and you want to get leaner, that is a great way to do it. We tend to see people drop 12 to 15 pounds in 4 weeks in a very simple, easy to follow manner. Okay, so until next time, I am Winston. My lovely partner, Catherine, is still out on her bike ride. So until next time, I will say them both, work hard, play dirty, and see you later.